So that's like I might have to hire.
All right, I'm going to call this special open work session budget work session to order. It's 6:30. Katie Kaufman has been excused, and so I guess we're going to start with the approval of the agenda. Okay, motion.
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Agenda.
Aye.
All right, so now we've got the budget work session. Mr. Bishop.
Thank you. If you wouldn't mind. Fantastic. Thank you very
There we
much.
go.
Apologize for the delay when we got the technology to cooperate. So if you wouldn't mind skipping on to that next slide, this is our budget workshop for fiscal '25. So as we start, we have to identify those priorities. So when we do, we bulleted out a list of those things that we consider as we go through the budgeting process itself. First and foremost, the budget directive, which you all approved a couple of months ago. We also consider the strategic plan, and then any reductions that were requested. We did update the budget process this year, which was an exciting adventure as we proceeded through the process. Equity and then safe and inspirational spaces. So these are all the things that we try to align our budget to as we go. Then this is the process. I won't read all these to you through here, but one of the things that we do consider quite strongly is the historical spending of each of our buildings and departments. So we scrutinize the budgets that are requested for the next fiscal year based on the current and the prior to. We feel that that average gives us a good benchmark to evaluate any of the ups and downs. And we call those out in more detail in the budget document itself. And of course, always the strategic plan and any planned programming coming out of the district or the building levels as we go through and do our evaluations of all the budgets. Then as we do that evaluation, we ask ourselves a number of questions. And one example is, what is the request? Is it a need or is it a want? Can you live without it? Is it absolutely necessary for the betterment of our children's education? Does it create a safety issue? So one of the things that go on to the next slide. One of the things that I questioned this year, and I'll call out Dr. Dietrich, I saw something appear in the budget that I hadn't seen before, annual basketball goal inspections. Well, apparently, basketball goals can fail catastrophically when they they do so, they injure people, namely our children. You can't have that. So one way to avoid that is to have those inspected every year. So once he said that this is a safety issue, okay, that's fine. We're going to have to do that because even if it doesn't hurt a kid, it's going to be an insurance claim, which also costs the district money. And multi-year subscriptions is another way that we've been able to capture the constant economy. We may spend more up front, so it might be a bit of a hit to the cash flow, but over time, it does save us money. One of those examples is a new tech subscription that we're rolling out this next year that will take care of our email archiving and also student email and document filtering. We also had our calendar evaluated, and they said you need to get rid of that calendar and replace it right away. So that's one of the things that we are taking under advisement and have decided to go ahead and do. Here we've broken out the different revenue sources and what each of them is composed of. So I won't read all of these to you, but one of the things that does sometimes surprise folks is Prop C, the sales tax revenue we get. It's collected by the state, so one would think on the surface that it would be coded to a state revenue code. In fact, it is coded to a local revenue code. So that is one of those things that sometimes folks don't fully understand, so we thought we'd put that out here. And then there is always on the county side that funny fines, forfeitures, and e-sheets. What is e-sheets, you might ask? It is basically property that's been forwarded or has no claimant, so it is reverted to the county or the state. And then, of course, this basic formula, which is composed of the basic formula and classroom trust fund that composes our state funding. And then the rest are there before you. Transportation, we mentioned it, but that's really less than $5,000. This is a really small source of revenue. The bulk of that transportation revenue comes through, I'm thinking food service is the one that is just under 5,000. Transportation is now almost fully funded. So it's a significant source of revenue where it has not been in years past. And next year it's planned to be funded at 100%. And then interest credits, qualified school construction bonds back in 2010 when the district assumed those, we do receive a portion of interest credit back on those, or excuse me, interest credits. But they've been reduced since sequestration. I reduced them significantly from where they were when we sold those bonds. Then here's an example of property assessments and the percentages at which those properties are taxed. 1912 and 32 for residential, agricultural, and commercial. And of course, Maplewood does not have any appreciable agricultural revenue, but some of our areas do. And then, of course, reassessments happen on the odd years, which is the odd tax year, not the odd fiscal year. So that's a bit of a confusing thing. So right now, we're finishing tax year 23 in fiscal 24. Next year is fiscal 25, but it's tax year 24. So it's a little bit confusing, but we get the hang of it after a while. Then, of course, TIFs, that's when we have companies that come in to develop areas of the city, and usually 22, 23 years is about the life of those TIFs unless they're paid off sooner. And those that additional assessed valuation goes on the tax rolls as new construction for us, and then it'll become part of the regular assessed valuation. Hancock Amendment is there to protect the homeowner or business owner from a sudden spike in assessed valuation. And so while local property assessed valuations may increase 16%, the maximum that the school district can realize is 5%. And the Hancock Amendment ensures that there is no windfall that comes to any of the taxing entities as a result of property reassessments. We've already discussed the reassessment cycle. So here's just a brief example of how the viewer or the audience can go about calculating what the tax will be. So in this case, for a $100,000 home, which is difficult to find in Maplewood these days, tax at 19% with a dollar tax rate, your property tax assessment then would be $190 on that piece of property. Then we'll jump to the historical tax rates. So we'll go all the way back to 2017. Of course, we are entering 25, which is the tax year 24. And if we were to lock those rates in today, this is what they would be. Of course, we won't get the certified rates from the county until July, so we are using our best estimate based on the information that we have on hand. We always, I mention it every time we discuss financial statements in the board meetings, the portion of our revenue that is funded from our local sources. Local taxes are the greatest of those sources, but as we discussed before, we also have things like preschool, tuition, Discover Club fees, student breakfast and lunch. Those all fall into that local category. So as you can see, that is right at 84% of all of our revenue that we collect. And this is the breakdown of our revenue across for operating funds, across local, county, state, federal, and any of that non-current revenue, and then any revenue from other LEAs. Right at $27.4 million for the upcoming fiscal year. Okay, so this is just a brief primer on the coding for salaries and benefits, and you'll notice this on the financial statements if you've looked at those, that 61s or the 6100s are salaries, the 62s are benefits, followed by purchase services and supplies, 6300 and 6400. Capitals are 65, and then long and short-term debt, whether it be on the operating side or on debt service, is coded in the 6600s. We jump into the expenditures. So this is how the expenditures broke out. So salaries, of course, being the largest part of our expenditures at $17.2 million, and then just behind that is the purchase, which is $5.7 million. And you can see the numbers there for purchase services, supplies, capital outlay is significantly down over prior years, and then long and short-term debt, which in this case includes both our debt service as well as debt we're holding on the operating side. So here is the nitty-gritty of salaries and benefits. So about $1.1 million, 7%, is the increase. Of course, we're entering now year 2 of a 2-year agreement with our teachers to raise salaries nearly 10%, plus the step each of those years, which is 2.75%. Benefits scale to salaries because of retirement. So if salaries increase, then the retirement will increase as well. Also, health medical benefits are included in that calculation. So as medical benefits increase, retirement increases as well. So we get hit twice on that. So we're looking at about a 10% increase. And it is important to note that we're tier 4, but just barely on our claims ratios, which means tier 5 would have netted us a significantly higher increase to our benefits. Purchase services, about 8.5% increase. Most of this is related to professional development and other services that we will be funding with our competency-based education grant, CBE grant, that Dr. McGee and his learning team were able to get for the district. Secure is the word I was looking for. Secure for the district. Supplies will be up about 8.7%, and you can see the breakdown of that. Capital projects will decrease about 48%. So as we are now about the strategic spend down of our fund balances, we do have to be cautious about what projects we do take on. And unfortunately, we are having to defer a number of those projects until we are able to secure either new money or find other areas of the budget to cut to fit those in. I won't go down this list. You can read these just as well as I can. But these are some of the larger projects, whether they be capital projects or otherwise. These are those things that are significant in expense that we are focusing on for this next year. And I've called out the areas that we used as consideration. So one of those is the ECC roof access ladder. So that's a safety issue. We have to do this. This is one of those areas where if we don't do it, it's just a matter of time before one of our maintenance workers is injured as a result of not having proper access to our roofs. So that's just one example. I've already mentioned the kiln. Of course, classroom intrusion prevention, that's another area that we'll spend a little bit of money on to make sure that our teachers feel safe in the classrooms. can't talk about the budget without talking about our general obligation bonds, our bonded indebtedness that comes from Fund 3, our debt service fund. We are looking at about 3.3 in principal and 1.4 in interest for a total of 4.7 overall. And it's a lot of numbers, it's kind of a small schedule here, but I would like to highlight that before Dr. Jamison and I dove in and scrutinized these budgets and pulled out, sharpened the pencil, whatever metaphor you'd like to use, we were at about 22.2%. And through that exercise, she and I spent a lot of time together this last month or so, we were able to get the fund balance projected up to about 26.5, which is a deficit spend of 2.2 million, and it was a little over 3.6 or thereabouts when we started the process. So significant reductions have been made. So the board did ask that we look at what a balanced budget would look like if we started cutting the budget significantly to get us at or near zero and as to a balanced budget. I started referring to that as budget B. So these are the things, I don't even like talking about these things, but these are the things that we do have to talk about. If we were to start cutting deeper into our budget, things like seed to table and farm to table, those healthy foods, those programs that a lot of folks have sought out as they've enrolled in our district. The impact here, immediate, we would have to eliminate those programs in all the gardens. The impact would be to enrollment. If a family did decide that if that was the primary reason why they were here, perhaps they would move on. And then, of course, district culture. It's become so ingrained. It would be a shame to lose this, but if we have to, this is the amount of money that it would save. Likewise for transportation. The transportation program as a whole costs significantly more than this, but we receive about $222,000 in state revenue as a result of the transportation program. So you can't have revenue from state transportation if you don't have a transportation program. So we wouldn't just lose the expense, we'd also lose the revenue as a result of that expense. And this is what that would net out to be. Home visits, you see the number before you. We've been doing home visits here for a significant amount of time to build relationships with our families and students such that they're comfortable, and we all know that students learn better when they have a relationship, a positive relationship with their students. Our metaphor is also one of the key pieces of the MRH climate and culture. Not the least of which is our expeditions, but it is also the most costly. So if we were to reduce our expeditions, which would include the long out of town expeditions that are middle school endeavors, and also our 6th grade when they go to on their capstone, this is the value of that. The athletics program, cutting the entire program all at once would be folly, in my opinion, but if we were, we would probably pull out these two of the most recently added sports, golf, boys and girls, or co-ed, which it is right now, and then boys volleyball, which was just added last year. Then, of course, instructional and professional development. So $230,000, this would be about a 50% decrease. And of course, that does impact directly the quality of instruction, our staff morale, and their feeling of support, and also with the recruitment and retention of qualified personnel. The academic cuts, right now the district does fund AP exams for our students. We also fund the early college or dual credit. As a matter of fact, there's an increase in the budget this year as a result of funding early college. ACT administration, we do pay for that universal administration as juniors. PSAT, the stamps for S, and the summer school programming that is ongoing right now. College and career readiness, MSIP 6, these are the impacts of these cuts. And of course, the technology department, as one who's been the director of the department, this one is difficult to look at, but outsourcing the technology department would save us about $150,000 a year if we were to take that out to a consultant basis. All those cuts that I've just mentioned would net us about 1.3 to $4 million, which would cut the deficit that we're looking at for next year. So what's next? We need to enact any cuts that the board requests between now and when final approval is slated. We'll make any adjustments to the budget book. We are still editing that. It's nearly its final form based on the outcome of this evening. Make any of those new adjustments. I recalculated state revenue last week. Dr. McGee and I did it the week before that. I'll probably do it a couple more times before next Tuesday just to make sure we're in good shape. I'll recalculate tax rates again just to make sure that we're in good shape there. Probably contact the state auditor's office too on any improvements that we've been working on the last couple of months. Once you all approve that budget, we'll load it into the system. We'll run the edit list, make sure it all checks out, and we'll communicate between the staff. We have so many new administrators and office staff. It has been a challenge bringing them all up to speed. We're not quite there yet, and the end of the year is testament to that. But we will get them there, and it's going to require quite a bit of engagement from me and my business services team. And people ask what we do over the summer. What are your questions?
Well, I have a significant amount of questions, and I guess I figured we'd have more than 9 minutes for questions, so I will try to cut them down to, I guess, a minute, so everyone has a chance. But I guess, you know, in general, looking at the budget, I mean, we have a problem. We don't have the funds to continue to spend like this. I don't think any of us is interested in cutting these particular things that have been outlined, because most of them are, I guess I shouldn't speak for everyone, but I mean, they're the things that make our district what it is. But with that said, I think it's a great exercise to show us and the community what we're facing. But I guess I saw a few things in the budget where, like, I felt like I was a little confused about the amounts we're spending on. So, like, one was the Board of Education budget. It's like $260,000 it showed in there, and I guess I don't know why. Maybe there are things in there I don't understand are part of it. I tried to parse it out, and sometimes the numbers, like one place showed $113,000. So I don't know if there's a way we can cut anything there. It seems like it's gone up a significant amount in the last few years. And then another one I saw was travel. Travel went up $160,000, and so I wasn't sure what that was for.
Jenny, can I ask a question
Yeah.
before we get to the first one? So Chris is pulling up the Board of Education budget. That item includes legal fees from
Right.
the district attorney. It includes MSBA dues.
Right, and that's why I was confused because the numbers didn't match. So in one place it said it was like $113,000, but then another place it said it was like $246. So that's why I guess maybe I'm a little confused about what that budget actually is.
Just depends on which breakdown you were looking at, the funds.
Chris, can you go through and call out the items? I think Jenny's first question was, what's all included?
Sure. We've got legal fees, election fees, which are just north of $15,000. Legal fees we expect to be somewhere around $45,000. Of course, we have the board professional development, which is right around $14,000. That includes the MSBA conferences as well as the consultants for equity training, which is one of those items that was called out in the budget directive. Also the summer retreat. We have board meeting travel, which is the result of the expenses that it costs to get to the lake for the MSBA conference. For 8 individuals, that's about $11,000. Dues and memberships, we are a member of the Newton County Chamber. That's a small expense, but then as a MSBA is about $16,000 for that board and community engagement, purchase services in the event that there's a death amongst our faculty, staff, administration. The board does contribute through an arrangement in regards to sympathy. And we have monthly engagement meetings and roundtable events and spirit wear and building team building events, which is a relatively small portion at $5,000. And of course, supplies, you know, the coffee and the snacks that we have here at the board meetings, those all cost money. $2,700. Nothing is free anymore, unfortunately. So those are the items that are specific to the board budget and why it is the way it is.
So is that amount, what, because I don't know if it was in a financial statement or something where it said 250, around 250,000. So I think that number's off. So it's really like 115,000 is more like it. Is that
The
accurate?
number is in the budget book under the Board of Education, page 19.
Yeah. So then it's the May finance, there's somewhere it has that number. Okay, so that's the number then, is the 130.
113,785.
Okay. And the next one, it's on page, sorry, I'm trying to, where was that? 71 is the travel, and it's 6343 is the number. And I was curious why it went up 150,000, or if that was maybe a miss.
It's not a miss. It is, let me see, 6343?
Yes. Page 71.
So travel, as I was going through the presentation, I did mention that we did receive that CBE grant, and we've nearly doubled our professional development as a result of that. So that's the dramatic increase you see there.
Okay, so it went up more than double though. I mean,
The grant's $400,000.
okay, so the grant will cover the total additional cost there?
Not completely.
It's already work that we started, so I think in one of the other meetings I mentioned that our ed services had already started work with CBE. So that's just a continuation. We were already funding some, so with the grant, we were able to offset some of the cost.
Okay.
The numbers I'm seeing in my mind's eye right now, I believe it was a $280,000 increase as a result of the grant, thereabouts.
Okay, I'll stop for now and let someone else ask questions, so I don't want to hog the whole time.
Chris, thank you for the exercise in proposed cuts. And again, I would remind folks that this is a pattern that we have lived through multiple times of going out to the community, receiving support for an increase, which has allowed things like teacher raises that ultimately do spend down the fund balance over the course of 5 to 7 years. How much do the cuts you propose impact the fund balance long term? I think the question in the decade that I've been on the board is always not if we will go out for another tax increase, but when. And if that is not the will of the community, you know, additional cuts can certainly be made in a way that
In
will
addition to
impact
these, yes.
the character of the district.
Yeah, so looking at that number, about 1.3 million or so, if you just adjust that for inflation over time, plus along with additional needs, I mean, you can expect that to grow 3 to 5% a year ongoing. Those programs, if they don't come back, of course.
And I will say, Katie, with that, we also pulled these out because the other proposed cuts that were included as considerations would actually have a greater impact when you begin to talk about retention and recruitment of staff. As Chris pointed out, the majority of our money is in salary, so then you begin to talk about reducing class sections, which still we could do and actually be under DESE's required number for students in the class, in addition to other cuts that would typically yield just a small amount of money and not have a huge impact, but also impact morale.
Yeah, I'm certainly cognizant of the fact that our most valuable asset, most expensive asset is our people. And looking at projections going forward, if we're anticipating classes of 110, going forward, do we need 6 sections at every grade level? is 5 sections at every grade level the more budget appropriate thing? I mean, those are the kind of cuts that are going to make the amount of, impact that would not require us to go out for a tax increase.
Yes.
But, if folks prefer for their children to have 15 students in their classroom versus 20, that's, that costs something.
Any other questions? Or do you have some more?
I don't know.
I think Brian has a question. I have a question. What is the preferred sort of, what's called, it's called fund balance? What percentage is sort of, what is your target? I mean, we're going down to 26.5, but then within 3 years, we're below 0. I mean, is there a target balance there?
Yeah, our budget directive, we targeted 24% as a spot as the target, so we were able to achieve that and do better than that. Of course, from where I sit, the higher the fund balance percentage, the better. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, the more cash in the bank, the better, right? But
We can't have it over a certain amount, though, per deci.
correct.
So
So we have to be careful because we also
Right.
don't want to be taxing the folks, taxing our community, overtaxing our community by holding all that money in the bank. So we have been strategic about it, but we also do understand that nothing is getting cheaper, and the majority of our expenditures are on the salaries and benefits category.
And then my only other question, I just have very high-level questions. So the Hancock Amendment limits us to 5%. Our property values have gone up by 23%. How long does it take to recover the value in tax receipts for that 23%? Is that 4 reassessment cycles, which is 8 years?
Roughly, I'm not quite sure that it scales quite that way, but because every
It's a
reassessment's
5%
gonna
of
get
5% of 5%. Yeah, I
exactly.
understand.
And it's the
but-
lesser of 5% too. So if CPI happens to be 3.1% that year, that's the increase that we would receive, not 5. So it's the lesser of 5%, the actual
Or
growth.
CPI.
Or CPI, yes.
Okay, so it could take more than a decade.
Correct.
Even
Yes,
though
and-
the property value has gone up, you can't really recoup it because Hancock limits you.
Correct. The only thing that we're able to recoup is protested taxes. We do have, there is a mechanism in place at the state where we can go back and recoup lost revenue over time. And we look back at the difference in assessed valuation now and then after the Board of Equalization or the State Tax Commission.
So yeah, Hancock's not really built for an inflationary period, strong inflationary period.
No.
That's all. Brian, do you have something to ask?
Yeah, thank you. I would like to know who is included in the salaries line for the communications area, business office, tech area, operations, and curriculum development. Those are some of the first several categories. And it wasn't clear to me how many persons were included there and at what rates. I was just curious if you have those numbers handy.
Is that
Or
something?
names, or numbers of persons handy.
Hey, Brian, is that something that we can bring back at the next meeting as far as who's in the department? So for the
Sure.
communications department, that's an easy one because there are only 2 individuals in that department. And for the salaries, I think those we brought those before.
Yes.
So those items, and then also I think the majority of them are listed as far as like direct reports, who's under each of the department in the org chart.
Correct, and I believe it's, well, I'll just give you the exact page number. If you jump to positions, which starts on page 105, each of the departments and those personnel are broken out there.
So I think he asked. Brian, can you repeat the 3 departments?
Sorry, did you say page 105, the names are there?
No, we wouldn't probably discuss those names in this forum, but we can provide them to you.
Is your
Yeah, well, I'm
ag,
just trying to find out the numbers of people included, I don't need names, numbers of people and salaries included just in those categories, the communications, business office, tech, operations and curriculum development. I mean, I also had questions. I think the issue is just looking at some other areas of potential trimming of the budget. Travel expenses on most of those probably could be trimmed by half in all of the administrative office positions. I'm just thinking about a whole basket of things, but I wasn't able to determine that issue, how the numbers of people whose salaries are represented by those numbers. I'm not looking for names or even salary numbers.
Sure.
But
Those
if you have
are
a sense of
beginning on page
how many are in each areas, that would help.
Beginning on page 105, those FTEs for those specific departments are listed. And full-time employment,
Page.
full-time equivalency.
Okay, I'm on page
I think it's
105.
I think it's page 108, not 105.
Yeah, because mine's not that on
Oh, I took my glasses off, sorry about that.
105.
Brian, it's on page 108
108, yes.
for the positions.
Oh,
And I think we brought earlier to the board the salaries for those individuals prior to, but all of the positions are listed inside of the budget handbook.
right. Yeah, okay.
So for instance, Brian, if you look at the,
I think I was just trying to map these positions to those salaries, and the numbers didn't line up for me, but this is just kind of detail stuff, and yes, you're.
sure, so the majority of what you just requested is in the administrative center, so, but yeah, we're happy to break those out by number in the categories that you mentioned.
I have one more question. Chris, you mentioned in your presentation about being tier 4, and that it sounded like that helped us have less of a percentage increase.
Correct.
If we were close to tier 5, does that mean next year we would likely be tier 5?
It's hard to say. It just depends on the overall health of the organization and how much they utilize those insurances.
Okay, that's what it's based
Yes,
on. Okay.
yeah, it's claims ratio. So
Okay.
the amount of money that we're paying, that the insurance company pays out in claims versus the amount that they're collecting in premiums.
Okay. And then I just wanted to say, I appreciate you guys going back and cutting stuff to get us to save some money. And it looks like, we're kind of right around where we want to be, but next year will be a different issue. And so I appreciate, that we're trying to show the community the ways we're trying to save where we can. And so I think that's helpful because I think we're going to need some help.
Yeah, and I would say too that the cuts that we suggested, and Benita mentioned as well, the cuts that we suggested are a starting point. There are ways to cut deeper, but as Katie mentioned, cutting deeper does then begin to exponentially impact climate, culture, retention, all those things that are front and center right now.
Just want to highlight, last year, we also increased minimum wage. And so when Chris and I were going through the budget to look at the impact, I think there are pieces that we forget about because we do make those changes, but support staff were raised up to $15 within the last year or so. We also right-sided from when we increased salaries to $15 for those individuals. It caused supervisors to make the same amount of money that some of the individuals who received raises received, and then, as Chris mentioned, the increase that the board approved as a means to become more competitive, but keeping in mind that we still are not moving the needle with the increases, because as we continue to move up, so does Kirkwood, so does Ladue, so does Webster Grove, and that's particularly where we see candidates go when they turn down our offers. And in looking at what we are expected to spend based on the increases, and as Chris said, for the benefits, what we're seeing, the increases are around the money. And so one of the things Chris and I talked about, we went back and looked at the fund balance prior to the pandemic and the insert of additional funds, had we given an increase prior to ESSER funds coming in, the fund balance would have been significantly low much sooner. So we are looking and taking a critical eye, but being completely honest, I struggle with cutting the things that make us who we are. So seed to table, metaphor, and then our teachers value the professional development that we're able to get. And so Stephanie Bouchard and also Dr. McGee and his team do a great job of securing grants and bringing in funds, but we have to find something outside of salaries that make people want to be a part of our community. So we're recognized we're in a tough spot. We really are taking a critical eye towards our budget, and we'll continue to do so as we bring this item back to you.
Any other questions? All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.